The first sign was a notification. Not even the text itself, but just a preview on the locked screen when the phone lit up while he was taking a shower, leaving the bathroom door ajar, as if the trust we once breathed still existed between us. I'm looking forward to Friday at the beach house. I bought red underwear. The rest disappeared into the ellipsis of Apple's privacy settings, turning into an understatement, into a caustic grain of doubt that sprouted instantly and irrevocably. The universe, as I saw at that moment, has a really twisted sense of humor. It gives you a fragment of truth, just enough to destroy your world, but not so complete that you can understand where this crack began, where exactly lies the line of betrayal and why all this is happening to you. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. My name is Martina. I'm the woman who stood there in the dimly lit bathroom, the toothbrush frozen in a swinging position, as if she didn't know whether to finish her way to her lips or powerlessly sink back into the glass. I was standing staring at my husband's phone on one of those unremarkable Thursday mornings in April that we used to spend in a lazy rush of coffee, packing, light kisses at the door and promises to call back. 13 years of marriage evaporated into his soul, and not because I saw anything specific. No, I didn't even touch the screen, unlock the phone, or give myself the slightest reason to be accused of distrust, but this moment defined everything. Late nights at work, sudden password changes, weekend conferences that didn't leave a single digital trace. I collected these details without realizing that they were forming a neat mosaic of destruction. He stopped looking into my eyes during intimacy, and there were subtle but steady changes in the intonation of his voice when he criticized my appearance, for the first time in more than a decade, and I put it all together like evidence in a case that I was ready to lead to the end. I didn't touch his phone. I didn't need it. Something inside me already knew. He knew. It was waiting. Confirmation of what my gut has been screaming for months. So when I rinsed my mouth, applied makeup with mechanical precision, and left the house like any other day, I was no longer the same woman who had woken up that morning. It wasn't just a day, it was the first day of my new life, the day when I finally admitted to myself that Romeo, my college sweetheart, my partner, with whom we built a house together, planned children, went through a miscarriage, lost and found hope, is now sleeping with another woman and planning to take her to our beach house, the very place that was sacred to me because the ghost of our unborn child once lived in it. I'm not naturally vindictive. I am a corporate lawyer. I solve problems methodically. I'm collecting evidence. I create cases. And that's exactly what I did. That night, when Romeo returned from another squash club meeting, drunk out of his mind with bourbon, I used his fingerprint to unlock my phone. It was a risky move, yes, but his deep drunken sleep after a sports night gave me every chance. And what I found wasn't an affair, flirting, or senseless cheating. It was a parallel life, a world in which I wasn't. Her name was Sophia. Not an intern, not an office intrigue, but a mature, beautiful, married woman, a representative of a pharmaceutical company, the same age as him. They had been dating for 7 months now. I flipped through hundreds of messages, thousands of lines of betrayal, each word of which is like a small blade, sharp, shiny, invisible from the outside, but leaving a cut in the very core of my soul. "Your wife doesn't understand you the way I do," she wrote, and this phrase, cliched to the point of vulgarity, could make anyone laugh, but not a woman whose life is falling apart from it. Enzo is going on a business trip to Chicago this weekend. A beach house? The message was 2 weeks old, neutral and emotionless, like an invitation to brunch, but it hit a point of no return. Enzo is her husband. And then, amidst this avalanche of pain, humiliation, and anger, something more was born in my chest. Not just rage, not just resentment, but a cold, impeccably clear goal. If they want to play adults who do stupid things, I can play too. But I'll play better. Finding Enzo turned out to be easier than I thought. LinkedIn, Instagram, a few strategic searches, and here he is, an architect, a design specialist, attractive in this creative, slightly casual style, which is so appreciated in cities with a coastline. Did he know? Was he as ignorant as I was? Or maybe he knew, but preferred not to face the truth. I wrote and deleted 17 messages before finally sending one, short, stern, and emotionless. This is Martina Guasco. I believe your wife Sophia and my husband Romeo are having an affair. If you want to discuss this, my number is listed below. 3 hours later, my phone rang. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number, and although my heart sank, my fingers trembled before touching the green circle, I already knew who it was. Is this some kind of malicious joke? The voice on the other end was taut, like a string about to snap, with the restraint of a man who had been silent for too long and was only now allowing himself to tremble. I wish that was the case, I replied, with that icy clarity that only comes when pain turns into action. I told him that they were planning to meet at our beach house this Friday, and after those words, there was that special silence between us that comes not from awkwardness, but from the realization that two strangers living on opposite ends of the same betrayal are now connected by an invisible but strong thread of understanding. What do you want to do about it? What is it? He finally asked, his voice still uncertain, but already deciding that there was no way back. And then, like an epiphany in the midst of darkness, an idea was born, flawless in its simplicity and crushing in its potential, an idea that combined intuition, anger, and cold logic. How do you feel about the opportunity to surprise them? I asked, and I felt the wings of a strange, almost inhuman calm spread inside me. I have the keys. We could have waited there. His laugh wasn't a laugh, but rather an echo, hollow and cracked, like the sound of glass falling on tiles. It's either the craziest or the most brilliant thing I've ever heard. Sometimes it's the same thing, I said, and we agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop to exchange thoughts and complete our plan. I remember when I came in and saw him for the first time. He was already sitting at a corner table, hunched over, holding a cup with both hands, as if trying to keep warm. When I sat down across from him, our eyes met, and I saw in his gaze the same pain I'd been carrying around for the past few weeks. He had kind eyes, now tired and aged, and betrayal had left its mark on him with the same cruelty as it had on me. They'll arrive around 7, I said, holding the cup carefully, as if it contained not just a scalding liquid, but a delicate balance between sanity and madness. Romeo told me he was flying to a medical conference in Boston. Do you like Sophia? Sales training in Chicago. Enzo's lips curled into a bitter smile. 8 years of marriage, and it never occurred to me to check anything. I put my palm on the table, not touching his hand, but close enough for him to feel my presence. Don't blame yourself. Trust is not stupidity. This is the foundation of marriage, I said, and he nodded slightly, accepting it as an axiom that we hadn't been taught in time. We spent 2 hours planning not revenge. That would be too low, too simple, but an accurate, almost surgical demonstration of the truth. No screams, no tantrums, no scenes, just facts, set up so that each element reveals its naked, inescapable meaning. They thought they were having a romantic weekend, an escape from everyday life, but in fact they were heading towards a reckoning that was clearly calculated and emotionally destructive. When we said goodbye, Enzo hesitated. There was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, too human not to understand. Are we doing the right thing? He asked. I thought about it for a while. I do not know if this is the right thing to do, I confessed. But I know that we cannot remain in this inaction. We must move forward, no matter how it looks. He nodded. Very understanding. With gratitude. That night, Romeo kissed me goodbye, with a suitcase in his hand, wearing the jacket I gave him for his 5th anniversary, without even noticing that the button had come off. I'll call you when I land in Boston, he said. I smiled. Have a nice flight, dear. I love you. The words of the lie scratched my tongue like sandpaper. The tears I swallowed were salty and hot, but not a single muscle moved on my face. Friday morning turned out to be clear and bright. The sun shimmered on the horizon as if it didn't know what kind of pain it was illuminating. A perfect day at the beach, ridiculously perfect. For the first time in 3 years, I took sick leave. I packed a bag with nightclothes that I hadn't worn in a long time, and told my assistant that I needed a mental health day. If only she knew how mental he was going to be. Going to the Hamptons has always filled me with peace, but not today. Today, every mile was counted by a heart beating like a metronome before a storm. Enzo and I agreed to meet at a diner a mile from home at 2 p.m. It gave us time to prepare ourselves, emotionally, strategically, physically. When I entered, he was already there, sipping coffee, staring out the window as if he could read the answers in the crooked trees behind the glass. "Have you reviewed it?" I asked, sliding into the booth opposite. He chuckled, sadly. "About 1,000,000 times. But I'm still here." It was awkward between us at first. What should be the procedure for planning an ambush with a man whose life was destroyed by the same woman who destroyed yours? But shared grief creates a strange intimacy, almost intimate, over sandwiches that none of us ever finished. We began to see each other not only as allies in misfortune, but also as living people. He said that he had suspended his career as an architect in order to support Sophia, allowing her to grow, learn, and achieve. "I designed our house," he said, almost in a whisper. "Every inch was created with our future family in mind. A family that, as it turns out, she doesn't want with me." I told how Romeo and I had been trying to have a child for many years, how every morning began with hope and ended with silent despair hidden behind smiles, how we went to doctors, held hands in sterile white rooms, drank endless vitamins, made plans, whispered the names of unborn children into the pillow at night, as if saying it alone could bring a miracle closer. I explained that the miscarriage was a heavy blow for him, not only a physical loss, but also a break that alienates even the closest ones, turning partners into neighbors in pain. He shut down emotionally, became quieter, moved on, and although at first I thought we were healing together, each at his own end of the gaping rift that had gone through our marriage, it turned out that he was healing with someone else. "You deserve better," Enzo said, and his voice was low but full of sincere sympathy. His eyes met mine, and there was no pity in that look, only respect, understanding, so rare and precious. "You too," I replied, and in those simple words reflected the complexity of our entire new reality, in which trust has become a fragment of the past, and solidarity is the only anchor. By the time we paid the check, a kind of solidarity had already formed between us, the kind that appears among people who find themselves in the same wreck. No one chooses fellow travelers on this trip, but that's why their bond is only stronger. In the beach house, we moved with precise, almost military efficiency, as if this was not the first time we were preparing a scene for exposure, and there was something cleansing about this strange ritual, as if order and structure could compensate for the chaos of emotions. I took Enzo on a tour of the house, carefully averting my gaze from those corners where laughter once sounded, from those pillows into which I sobbed after nights without sleep. "They'd probably go straight to the master bedroom," I said coldly, like a realtor discussing square footage, and there was protection in that indifference. "Should we wait there?" "What is it?" he asked, and I thought about it. "No. Living room. Better lighting, more exits, less intimacy." We prepared the scene like directors, thinking about every visual and emotional accent. 2 chairs facing the front door, a bottle of Romeo's favorite scotch and 4 glasses on the coffee table. A theatrical device, yes, but in psychological warfare, even props matter. While we were waiting, I went out on the terrace, looking at the ocean, its endless breathing, the waves crashing on the shore with indifferent persistence. Nature, as always, was inexorably calm, indifferent to human tragedies, as if saying, "All this has happened 1,000 times." Enzo joined me, and his silent presence was surprisingly soothing, as if he were not only a witness, but also an anchor. "When did you first get suspicious?" "What is it?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the horizon. I remembered the day when I caught an unfamiliar scent on Romeo's collar, too floral, too feminine. He said he hugged his colleague goodbye. I wanted to believe. Then he began to hide the phone, explaining it as official confidentiality. But everything was clearer not because of the words, but because of the silence between us. He stopped seeing me. For real. Can you really see me? I asked. Enzo nodded. Sophia started picking fights for no reason, he said. She created a distance to justify her actions. The classic dissection scheme. Demonize your partner and everything becomes possible, I agreed. We shared stories as the sun set, its light softened, its shadows lengthened, and images of the past came to life in these shadows. How Romeo and I met at law school, how we argued until we were hoarse, and then reconciled in the library between the shelves. How Enzo proposed to Sophia in Paris, on the Alexander Bridge. 3. Where a street violinist was playing, and passers-by applauded when she said yes. We shared memories of the lives we had built with love, patience, and naive faith in the strength of the future. And now it's all in ruins. What will you do then? Enzo asked, and his voice wasn't accusing. Just a question. Divorce. I do not know, I confessed. Part of me wants to burn everything down. The other one still remembers the man I married. I turned to him. And you? I still love her, he replied, and his honesty amazed me. But I'll never be able to trust her again. What kind of marriage is there without trust? We were interrupted by a short notification from my phone. The security system. A car is approaching. My heart sank, my stomach clenched, and my breath caught in my throat. They're early, I whispered, glancing at my watch. 18:15. We rushed inside and took up our positions, like actors on stage, not completely sure of our lines. The sound of laughter echoed down the path, light, carefree, intimate, and it pierced my chest like an arrow. The key is in the lock. A click. The door swung open. Romeo entered first, carrying 2 bags and a bottle of champagne, his face beaming with anticipation. Behind him is Sophia, with a bag of groceries and a bouquet of flowers. They were so engrossed in each other, so sure of their safety, that they didn't notice us right away. Baby, where should I put it? Romeo began, but froze when his eyes met mine. The bottle fell out of his hands and hit the floor, loudly, like applause at the end of a tragedy. Sophia gasped, covered her mouth with her hand, and the flowers slipped from her fingers. 4 people. 2 marriages. 1 moment of ruthless truth. Welcome to our beach house, I said, my voice sounding unnaturally calm, as if I were greeting guests at a reception rather than catching them in the act. Enzo and I decided to join the party. Romeo turned as pale as a marble statue. Sophia began to tremble. Martine, I can explain, he began. Really? I raised an eyebrow, tilting my head to the side, because I'm genuinely interested in hearing you explain that you're sleeping with a representative of your pharmaceutical company at our beach house. The one where I lost our baby. You are welcome. Enlighten us. Sophia turned to Enzo, tears already streaming down her cheeks, leaving wet trails on her skin, like rain on a windowpane in a calm. Enzo, it's not, she began, her voice trembling like that of a child caught in a lie, but he cut her off with a gesture in which there was neither anger nor aggression, only fatigue. Just don't, he said, quietly but peremptorily, in a voice in which the last note sounded, putting an end to a long, forgotten melody. We found the messages. That's it. The silence that followed these words was so thick that it seemed as if the air had become viscous, and it took effort to take a breath, as if the room itself was rejecting those present. I stood looking at them and said, 7 months, dully, without color, but in those 2 words there was all the pain, all the bewilderment and contempt. 7 months of lying. Did you laugh at how stupid we are? How easy is it to cheat? My gaze darted between Romeo and Sophia, and even though I wanted to scream, I spoke evenly, like a prosecutor reading an indictment. It's not like that. Romeo pleaded, taking a step forward, as if hoping to get closer to forgiveness, but Enzo jumped up, blocking the way and not letting him or himself catch his breath. And how was it? Explain it to us, he demanded, looking straight into the face of the one he considered a friend. We have the whole weekend. And that's when Sophia literally collapsed, not metaphorically, not figuratively, but really. Her knees buckled, her body slid to the floor as if it had been crushed, and she found herself among scattered flowers, among glass fragments, in her own confession. I'm sorry, she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. Romeo remained standing motionless, his face like a battlefield after a storm, crumpled, empty, without a guide, reflecting at the same time guilt, confusion, and a desperate attempt to find an excuse. Martine, please, his voice became soft, pleading, let's talk in private. I looked at him and shook my head. No more secrets. No more personal discussions. Whatever you want to say, you can say it in front of everyone. And at that moment, perhaps the most painful 2 hours of my life began, a dialogue that tore my heart apart, but which was necessary, like a surgical operation without anesthesia. They did not know and could not have known that this meeting was planned with greater precision than they could have imagined. It was not an accident, not an outburst of emotions, but a cold, thought-out strategy to the smallest detail. It was no accident that Enzo and I were here, and it was no accident that we chose this particular evening. We didn't just take them by surprise, we led them to this point, like strategists leading an opponent to a trap. While they stammered, and got tangled up in their own excuses, I maintained impeccable composure, letting the weight of their betrayal hang in the air like a guillotine. Romeo stared at me with an expression that was a mixture of shock and an attempt to understand why I was so calm. Where is the hysteria? Where are the tears? Where are the thunder and lightning that he might have expected? He didn't know that I had spent the previous day collecting evidence, methodically, meticulously, with cold calculation. I forwarded all the correspondence between him and Sophia, found in the cloud backup, to a secure mailbox. I photographed the credit card statements that showed the candle at dinners, hotel rooms, flower shops, and jewelry salons hidden under business expense codes. I even recorded a conversation with his assistant, who accidentally admitted that there was no conference in Boston. Let's all sit down, I said when the first flurry of emotions had subsided. We have a lot to discuss. We settled into the living room like we were in a group therapy session, only without a therapist, without guidance, only with the inescapable fact of cheating hovering over our heads. Romeo and Sophia were on the couch, and even now, even in this exposure, their bodies were still striving for each other, a little closer, a little warmer, as if they were looking for the old. Enzo and I sat on separate chairs, facing them like judges. I poured out the scotch, the expensive one that Romeo kept for special occasions, and raised the glass. A toast, I said. For honesty. Finally. Romeo looked at me in disbelief. He had expected something else. He came into battle armed with a shield, ready for a storm, for flashes, but faced with cold, with unpredictable silence. How long have you known? What is it? He asked cautiously. A long time ago, I replied, without specifying that the whole truth had been revealed to me in just 36 hours. Let him think that I've known for months. Let him worry, wondering what else I know. Enzo has played his role perfectly so far. We agreed in advance. He will be the anger, I will be the cold. A good cop and a bad cop, but both are deceived spouses. Both are victims trying to restore the balance of the world. Were you ever going to tell us? What is it? He demanded, looking at Sophia with that look that used to make her melt. Or were we destined to live forever in ignorance? Sophia couldn't look at him. I do not know, she whispered. I kept telling myself that it would end soon, but it didn't happen. In fact, everything just got worse, Enzo added, like a surgeon opening an abscess. Weekend trips. Plans for the future. Romeo flinched, bullseye. I picked it up. You were talking about a future together, and looking at him, and you? His silence was the most eloquent confirmation. They didn't realize that while waiting for them to arrive, Enzo and I had discovered something unusual. We, who seemed to be in the same boat only because of betrayal, realized that a strange, almost unconscious connection had arisen between us, not in the sense of replacing lost love or hastily plugging a hole in our hearts, but in a deeper, human dimension. We were brought together by a common trauma, like two strangers trapped under the rubble of the same building, and therefore beginning to understand each other without words. But besides the pain, we had one more thing in common. We both turned out to be people who were able to think strategically, keep emotions in check, and use our minds as weapons. During the hours that we spent together, hiding, building a plan, our initial intentions, just to have a confrontation, to throw away all the resentment, to unleash anger, evolved into something much more sophisticated, almost theatrical in scope. We didn't just expose treason, we regained the power, dignity, and self-esteem of the masters of our own lives. "That's what's going to happen," I said, carefully setting my glass with the untouched scotch on the wooden surface of the coffee table so as not to leave a drop on my tongue, as I didn't want to leave any more doubts about my intentions. "Romeo, you have to make a choice today. But before you do it, you need to know a few things." I slowly, almost solemnly, took out a folder from my bag, simple in appearance, but inside it contained documents that in the next few minutes could destroy not only my marriage, but also my career. There were printouts of their messages, sometimes sparsely businesslike, but every now and then there were notes of flirting, touching in the text, words that could not be explained outside the context of passion. There were also card statements, the names of restaurants, hotel reservations, and confirmations of boutique deliveries. There were photos that Enzo found in Sophia's cloud storage, not explicit, but they had such intimacy, such ease of being together, that any one of them cut harder than any knife. "First of all," I said, looking straight into Romeo's eyes, "I dated Patricia Carlton." He turned pale. Even Sophia flinched when she heard that name. Patricia is the managing partner of our law firm, a woman whose opinion weighed more than any protocol. And, more importantly, she was the person who had to make the final decision on Romeo's promotion to senior partner. We had a hypothetical discussion about workplace ethics, I continued, watching every change in his face. About what can happen if one of the company's employees enters into a personal relationship with a representative of a pharmaceutical company that is under the legal care of that very company. About conflicts of interest and reputational risks. He sucked in a shuddering breath. "You wouldn't do that," he whispered. "I haven't done anything yet," I replied calmly. "I'm just exploring my options." Enzo picked up the subject without a pause. "And as for Sophia," he said, without taking his eyes off her, "Mercer Pharmaceuticals has a strict internal rule: no romantic relationships with representatives of client companies. Romeo represents Mercer's 3 largest clients." The blood drained from her face. "How did you?" she began, but Enzo interrupted. "I am a member of the corporate ethics board at my architectural firm. I know how such roles are written. And, by the way, I know your regional director, David. We play squash on Wednesdays." He lied. They only met once, briefly, at a charity event, and that was it, but Sophia didn't know. That's where our trump card was. We weren't blackmailing or threatening, we were just describing a reality they preferred not to think about. The consequences existed independently of us. I leaned forward, keeping the coldness out of my voice. "That's what I find interesting, Romeo," I said. "When I lost our child, here, in this house, you couldn't find the strength to be around. You said you needed space to live out your grief. Tell me, was Sophia your form of grieving? Was she your comfort while I was falling asleep alone, crying?" For the first time, Sophia looked truly shocked. She turned slowly to face him, as if for the first time seeing the man she shared a bed with. You never told me about the baby," she whispered. A new silence filled the room, filled with cracks, the first serious crack in their united front. "There's so much you don't know about each other," Enzo said softly, as if drawing an intermediate line. You have hidden so much not only from us, but also from each other. That was our biggest epiphany of the evening. Their union was built on an illusion. On the images. They showed each other carefully selected scenes, like movie trailers, without backstage, without the dirty truth. All we had to do was pull the curtain. Romeo, I said to him, in a tone that for the first time sounded not a threat, but a bitter regret. Did you tell Sophia about your gambling problem during law school? About how your parents paid off your debts so you wouldn't be expelled? Why do we keep separate financial records for all 13 years of marriage? Another blow. I saw Sophia's eyes widen. And then Enzo, without giving me a chance to catch my breath. And you, Sophia. Does Romeo know that your brother has been in rehab for 3 months? The real reason we couldn't afford to renovate the kitchen last year was because we were paying for Ricardo's treatment. Romeo shifted uncomfortably in his chair, as if suddenly his back felt the pressure of all those years during which he deftly dodged questions, hid bills, shifted responsibilities, and built mosaics of plausible silence. What's it? Some kind of slander? What is it? He asked, and his voice was shaking not from anger, but from the realization that the ground beneath his feet was no longer under control. No, I reply with the calmness that comes only after complete inner surrender to the truth. This is reality. Complicated, confusing, like an abandoned garden where everything grows without measure, entwining each other with weeds of lies and thorns of half-truths. And both of you deliberately avoided it, creating a comfortable illusion. Enzo and I didn't come here out of a desire to take revenge or humiliate. We weren't cruel for the sake of cruelty. I paused, letting every word settle in the room like ashes after a fire. In our conversations, we came to an amazing discovery, I continued, now addressing Sophia rather than Romeo. You both justified your relationship by painting us, your spouses, as flawed, emotionally draining, cold, overly ambitious, or, conversely, insufficiently passionate. It was part of the ritual to create a counter-narrative where betrayal looked like salvation. But in reality, you were just hiding. They hid from the fact that real intimacy is to see other people's flaws and stay. These are not the idealized versions of each other that you have created, Enzo. These are real people. With fears, mistakes, fatigue, and imperfections. I stood up, feeling a surge of energy envelop me from the inside, and went to the window, where the reflection of darkness in the glass merged with the ocean horizon. We are not here to decide your future for you. We are here to regain our dignity. Our right to be heard. Our truth. Romeo stood up, slowly, like a man who feels his world is falling apart and doesn't know what to grab onto. He stepped closer. Martine, can we talk in private? I turned around, my eyes met his, and at that moment our whole story, from the very beginning, all its bitterness and deception, passed between us like lightning. No, Romeo, I said firmly. Whatever you want to tell me, you will say here. In front of everyone. That's the essence of this evening. No more secrets. No doors slammed shut from prying eyes. No separate rooms. We bring everything out into the light. There was something new in his gaze, not fear, not remorse, but recognition. He realized that I had changed. There was no longer that martyra who cried into her pillow at night, wondered what she had done wrong, and tried to save the marriage alone. I was no longer a comfortable, approachable woman. I'd become someone who can't be ignored. A force to be reckoned with. What was going to happen next was as unknown as a path in the fog, but it was no longer frightening. Whether they chose to stay together, break up, lie to each other again, or tell the truth for the first time, it didn't matter to Enzo and me. Because we have already won our victory. We refuse to be victims, silent observers of a performance staged without our participation. We wrested a role for ourselves and rewrote the script. We forced reality to look at itself in the mirror and see what kind of fantasy it has become. When I turned away from the window, I saw Enzo, leaning on the back of an armchair, and he caught my gaze across the room. His slight nod, silent, respectful, was a confirmation that we were together. The most important thing: that we will no longer allow ourselves to be neglected. And then, in the silence that followed, the voice cut through the air like a blade. I want a divorce. He didn't belong to me or to Enzo. It didn't even belong to Romeo. These words were uttered by Sophia. Abruptly, cleanly, as if she had thrown away everything she had carried in herself for months. Romeo turned to her as if he had just heard the name of a dead person. What? Sophia, you can't be serious. After everything. After all that, Romeo? She interrupted, and her voice sounded unexpectedly firm, even though tears were running down her cheeks. After we risked everything? After we built a mirage, believing that it would withstand the weight of reality? Look at them. She pointed at Enzo and me. Look what we've done to them. Look at what we've turned ourselves into. Enzo and I exchanged silent glances, not triumphant, but full of cautious, incredulous surprise. It was a development that we could not have predicted. We expected a storm of denial, shouting, and attempts at justification. But not this sudden, almost painful moment of enlightenment. You told me, Sophia turned to Romeo, and there was pain in her eyes, sharper than any resentment, that your marriage is already dead. That Martina is cold, marble, a career, that you're just waiting for an opportunity to leave. And I believed it. I allowed myself to believe that you can love me completely, without looking back, because she leaves you no room. But now I can hear her. I see her. And I understand that you were just lying. Me and myself. I suppressed a shudder. So that's what I was like in his stories. It's cold. Obsessed with work. The woman he couldn't really love. I thought I was the one who sacrificed, supported, rebuilt my life, adapted, suppressed my desires, dreaming of a home, a child, a future. And for him, I was an obstacle. And then Sophia turned to Enzo, and tears were already flowing freely down her face. I've convinced myself that you don't love me anymore. That you stayed by my side just out of a sense of duty. It was easier than admitting that maybe it was me. That maybe I was the person you were trying to escape from. Enzo exhaled like a man who has suddenly had his breath taken away. How could you think that? What is it? He whispered. I designed our whole house around you. I was looking for ways to make you happy, planning trips, arranging dates, trying to talk about children, about the future that you kept putting off, as if afraid it would destroy the illusion of the present. Because I was confused, she cried. Because something was missing, and I didn't know what. Romeo, as if forgetting where he was and who was around, took a step towards Sophia, but she abruptly raised her hand and stepped back, as if afraid that his touch would completely destroy the shaky structure that she was still trying to hold in herself. No need. Just don't, she said, turning away, and then her gaze fell on me. There was no malice in that look, not even a defensive taunt, just a haggard realization of what he had done. I'm sorry, Martine. I know it doesn't mean anything. But I'm really sorry. I didn't answer. Not with a nod or a gesture. Because at that moment, simple regret was not enough to measure the depth of what was destroyed. There was a pause, not the heavy silence that precedes an explosion, but another, viscous, like a thick fog, where none of us knew where to go next. Enzo and I had envisioned a completely different ending, spectacular exposure, cold presentation of the facts, restrained rage, followed by an admission of guilt. We expected a scenario in which we would have power, moral, emotional, intellectual. But instead, we got a human drama, shapeless like the sea in bad weather, where no one knew where the shore was. Romeo, who suddenly lost all his confidence, sank down on the sofa, clutching his head in his hands, as if trying to squeeze the past into a fist. I never wanted this to happen, he gasped. But when I looked at him, I no longer felt pity, only the need to tell the truth to the end. But you made 1,000 conscious choices to make it happen, I replied, my voice muffled but clear, like a stone falling into water. You lied to me, over and over again. You hid the checks, tricked me, made up stories about negotiations and business trips when you were actually hiding in someone else's arms. And the worst part is that you used our shared pain, our loss, as a shield to justify your betrayal. It wasn't just cowardice, it was cruel. He looked up, and they were bloodshot, from exertion or from tears, restrained or already shed, it didn't matter. After we lost the baby, I couldn't be the husband you deserved anymore, Martine. Something broke in me. I felt like I was disappearing. That's why you disappeared with another woman, I said. While I was suffocating from grief, you were looking for a way out. And I found him in Sofia. Enzo, who had been standing silently up to this point, went to the bar and poured himself another glass of bourbon, with a hand that was slightly trembling but resolute. So what now? What is it? He asked, looking up at us. Where does that leave us? And then, as if there weren't enough punches already, Romeo said, Sofia is pregnant. The world tilted beneath my feet, as if the earth had lost its stability. I grabbed the back of the nearest chair, otherwise I probably would have fallen. My heart started pounding in my temples. What? Enzo's voice was quiet, almost lifeless. Sophia lowered her head, and the tears flowed freely, as if she no longer saw the point in holding them back. 8 weeks, she whispered. I only found out about it last week. The brutality of this moment was almost aesthetic. After so many years of trying, after our tragedy that happened within these very walls, he accidentally creates a life with someone else. Is this mine? Enzo asked, and his voice cracked like a branch under the weight of snow. Sophia nodded, not looking at either him or Romeo. That's how it should be. Romeo and I have always been careful. We froze. Another twist, a new layer of lies, a new pain. The child was not Romeo. And if earlier it could have been perceived as a relief, now it didn't matter. Too much had already been destroyed. Romeo looked as if he had been physically struck. You didn't tell me you were pregnant. I was going to. This weekend. I needed to figure out what I wanted. I watched their dialogue as if through a cloudy glass, with the feeling that all this was not happening to me. It was like watching a movie scene with other people's characters, other people's destinies. Everything has become too big to fit into one life, one pain. And you were going to tell your lover that you were pregnant with your husband's child? I asked, and my voice, although calm, sounded like a punch. In the romantic setting of my beach house. It's ironic to the limit. Enzo finished his drink. I've wanted children for 3 years. 3. And you've been saying all along, not now. And all this time you've been sleeping with someone else. Fine. The energy of destruction hovered in the room, heavy as a thunderstorm, full of silent menace. We stood at the crossroads of destinies, each ready to collapse or survive. No one knew. And then the phone rang. Shrill, defiant, alien to everything that was happening. I automatically looked at the screen and felt a new spark ignite in me, not pain, but absurdity. This is Patricia, I said, turning to Romeo. The managing partner you're so afraid of disappointing. He recoiled as if I'd shot him. I went to the kitchen to pick up the phone. The conversation was short but intense. When I returned to the living room, 3 pairs of eyes stared at me, scared, tense, full of questions. It was Patricia, I explained. She confirmed our meeting tomorrow at breakfast. It turns out that there is progress in the Mercer Pharmaceuticals case. She's staying at her place on the beach, just like us. And she offered to meet at the Morning Tide, at 9. All 3 of them. Sophia sank into a chair. This is really happening, isn't it? Our lives are really falling apart." There was no hysteria in her voice, just fatigue, almost physical, the kind that can be felt in the body after a long sleepless night spent thinking, regretting, and endless mental rehearsals of possible outcomes. I looked at her with unexpected sympathy for myself, not because I had forgiven her, or because I had forgotten, but because I saw in her a person who had been crushed by circumstances before she had time to realize the damage she had done to others. Lives don't fall apart all at once, Sophia. They are being destroyed by decision after decision, like an inexorable drop sharpening a stone. But they can also be restored. Step by step. The same goes for solution after solution. Enzo came over and stood next to me, his shoulder brushing against mine, and that simple movement said more than could be put into words. We were no longer on opposite sides. We were a team. A united front. "Martine and I made our own decisions today." His voice sounded firm, almost solemn, as if he was announcing a change of course. "We decided not to be collateral damage in your narrative." Romeo raised his head, his gaze clouded and distant. "What does it mean? What is it?" he asked, as if hoping for a gentle follow-up. I looked him straight in the eye, calmly, clearly, without anger, but also without a shadow of forgiveness. "This means that I've already transferred half of our assets to accounts that you don't have access to. This means that I have documented every aspect of your case, including the misuse of company resources that you directed to finance your love affair. This means that I am ready to file for divorce on the grounds of adultery with exhaustive evidence." His face contorted, but not from pain, but rather from the realization of the inevitable. "Did you plan all this? Do you like it?" "No, Romeo," I said calmly. "I don't like this. But I refuse to be a victim in my own story." I turned to Sophia. "As for your pregnancy, it's your and Enzo's own business. But no matter how you decide, I advise you both to get tested for STIs immediately. Given the general lax attitude towards fidelity in this room, it's just a sensible precaution." The clinical accuracy of my words, spoken without a trace of irony, was a slap in the face, sobering and harsh. Romeo flinched, as if I'd just pulled a hidden knife out of thin air. Sophia shrank as if under a gust of cold wind. Enzo cleared his throat. "Sophia, I'm going to spend the night with my brothers tonight. Take the time to decide what you want. Real clarity, not just a reaction. I'll call you tomorrow. And, Romeo," I added, "you can take the beach house tonight. I'm not staying. And Enzo, too. We both booked rooms at Harborview." Romeo looked like he didn't understand how reality could be so harsh. "Are you staying at a hotel together? Connecting rooms? What is it?" he asked, as if it mattered at all. I smiled a little, but there was no warmth in the smile. "We've become something you might not recognize. Friends united by a common experience. We have dinner together and plan our next steps." "Next steps?" Romeo repeated it like an echo. I nodded. "Life goes on, Romeo. With or without you, it's my decision that I'm making now." When Enzo and I were packing our things to leave, Sophia came up quietly and gently touched my hand and said, "To be honest, he was always talking about you. Even when he criticized you, there was always a tinge of awe in his words. I think he still loves you." I gently removed her hand. "That's the tragedy, isn't it? Love is not enough. Trust, respect, and honesty are the basics. Love without them is just a beautiful house built on shifting sand." We left them there, in that room where the air was thick with understatement and regret, among the wreckage of their own decisions. As Enzo and I walked along the quiet beach path to our cars, the sound of the waves created a constant, even background, like a heart that continues to beat, no matter what. "Well," he finally said, his voice ironically calm. "Everything didn't go exactly as planned." I laughed. "Sincerely, unexpectedly, loudly. No, of course not. Are you okay with the baby? I asked, already getting into the car. He looked at the dark, boundless ocean. I don't know. Part of me is furious. And the other part still wants the family we planned. You don't have to make a decision tonight, I reminded him. You too, he said after a pause. About Romeo. I nodded, grateful that he didn't insist. We reached our cars and stopped for a moment, as if we didn't want to rush the moment. Two strangers united by unusual circumstances. Dinner? He asked. Dinner, I replied. I think we deserve it. 6 months can change everything or nothing. In my case, that's it. Romeo and I got divorced. Not dramatic. No shouting, no legal wars. Just as a fact, confirmed by daylight. Our marriage broke up with amazing speed, as if all those years we lived together were just a fragile showcase with no foundation behind it, and if you just shake it a little, everything crumbled with the suddenness and inevitability of an avalanche that no one can stop. The evidence I gathered secured a settlement in my favor, not because I sought revenge, but because justice, once off balance, needed a fulcrum to regain its face. Romeo did not resist, did not make a scene, did not beg for mercy. Perhaps his own guilt and the realization of who he had lost were the most severe and just punishment for him. He did not lose his job, the company, as always, saved face, but he lost the most desired thing, a promotion to the position of senior partner, which was a dream that fueled his ambitions for many years. Patricia was disappointed. She confessed to me one day over a cup of strong black coffee, but she was pragmatic. The company has experienced more serious scandals. I nodded, silently accepting the fact that the professional world doesn't feed on emotions. It lives by the cold logic of profit and reputation. Although I expected more from him, not a gesture, not a plea, but at least sincere regret, not a mask, but a person. The story of Sophia and Enzo took a completely different turn. After several weeks of separation, complete silence, therapeutic consultations, and sleepless nights, they decided to try again, setting strict but necessary boundaries, sharing responsibility and, most importantly, agreeing to painful honesty, which requires courage, which is not always enough even for love. Pregnancy became a bridge, shaky, fragile, but still connecting them again, and when their daughter was born last month, Enzo sent me a photo, a pink-brown baby in a soft blanket, with a simple message: new beginnings are possible. Thanks for that evening. For everything. I stared at this short letter for a long time, rereading the lines more than once, feeling as with each phrase the inner resistance is replaced by peace. Romeo and Sophia ended their relationship immediately after that quarrel, and according to our mutual friends, they can barely look at each other at industry events now, as if there was nothing but an empty illusion. Fiction, born on the background of passion, rarely stands up to the harsh light of reality. As for me, I sold my share of Romeo's beach house, not out of spite, but out of the realization that some places become too crowded with ghosts that appear in silence, between heartbeats, between inhaling and exhaling. Instead, I bought a small cottage further down the coast, tucked away on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the raging and endlessly vibrant Atlantic Ocean. This place is wild, untamed, beautiful, and completely mine. I started dating again, cautiously, without haste, allowing myself to be trusted, but not blindly, and I learned to recognize the warning signs, the ones I had previously ignored, attributing them to exciting passion or character traits. I've learned that loneliness within a marriage is a slow, acting poison, much more destructive than the solitude you choose on your own terms. Enzo and I still meet up sometimes, for a cup of coffee, for a leisurely dinner, where there is no tension, there are no misunderstandings. Not in a romantic sense, no. We both understood that a bond that grew up on the wreckage, where trauma serves as a binding solution, cannot become a solid foundation for love. But from this experience, full of pain, humiliation, epiphanies, and choices, a real, reliable friendship was born. Sometimes he brings his daughter with him, and I take her in my arms, feeling not envy, not resentment, but a complex, deep mixture of feelings, where most of all, respect for how they were able to rethink and rebuild their lives. She's innocent. She is a new breath in their story, and I am glad that she is destined to be written in a different way. Last week, I ran into Romeo at a colleague's retirement party. It was the first time we saw each other in society after the divorce, and when I saw him, I felt not a wave of pain, but a slight, almost sad detachment. He looked older, tired, like a man who was trying to recover what he had lost, but didn't know where to start. "You look good," he said, and there was a note of surprise in his voice, as if he expected to see someone broken. "Probably great." "Lingering pain," he added, his gaze sliding over my face, trying to find the surviving fragments of the past in it. "I'm fine," I replied, and was amazed to realize that it was true. "Martine, I wanted to say," he began, but I gently interrupted him, not with coldness, but with firmness. "You don't need to. We both said everything that mattered." He nodded, accepting the boundary, quietly, without protest. "Are you seeing anyone?" "What is it?" he asked, but then hurriedly added, "I'm sorry. It's none of my business." "It's okay," I said. "Yes, I'm dating someone. It's been a few months now. It's something new, but it's good. Simple. Honestly." Pain flashed across his face like a reflection of light on glass, but disappeared before it could turn into words. "I'm glad you found it. You deserve it." "When we broke up," he added, "I was in therapy. I was trying to figure out why I did what I did. It wasn't you, Martine. It was never you." "I know," I said, and I really did. After all, his betrayal was a flaw in his character, not a reflection of my worth. And when I left this party, to the sounds of jazz, through lively conversations and the clink of glasses, I felt the last weight slip off my shoulders. Some people come into our lives as a constant, others as a pain, as a lesson. Romeo became the second. That night at the beach house changed the lives of 4 people. So one chapter ended, and another began. And now I'm standing at the huge window in my cliff house, watching the waves crashing against the rocks, and I feel grateful. For that terrible night. For the powers I've gained. For the woman I've become, the one who got out from under the rubble. The truth can be devastating, but it's also liberating. My new house has large windows, and every morning when the sun rises above the horizon, its light floods the room, filling it with gold. No shadows, no corners to hide in. Just clarity. Beautiful, painful clarity. And in this light, I finally saw myself. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.